Hello everyone, welcome back to another Woodworking Wisdom. My name's Ben. Today we're kind of following on from another one we did yesterday with Colwyn. Sorry guys, just a moment. I think the sound needs to just go down on the other laptop there. Sorry about that, folks. So I just got my voice replaying in the background there. So today we are looking at the second part of our wood turning project. So just one moment. Okay, we got that one now. So we're just having a couple of sound issues here. Okay. All right, yeah. So here we go. We are looking at woodcut here. This is our Pro Mount. We've got our wood turning bowl that Colwyn did with us yesterday. Okay, so we've got this lovely sycamore platter that Colwyn did for us. And it's coming out as an Ammonite. Okay, I've got this template that we're putting on top here. And I've marked some of this out already. Okay. So, like I say, Colwyn turned this on the lathe yesterday. And if we have a look under here, we've still got the chuck. All right, this is our SK114. And that's what's gripping onto the bottom of this. I'm using this like a carving vise. Okay. With this Pro Mount, we've got all sorts of little adjustments we can make. We can rotate the workpiece, lock him back up, and we can also tilt it. Okay, so it's a really handy little thing. So let's get that all locked back up. I've already done some of the marking out on this one. So on the plate here, just to save a bit of time, you can see I've already started to transfer that that image on. And the way I've done that is used a bit of carbon paper. Okay, so we've got a bit of carbon paper here, and that goes shiny side down on our platter. And you can see I've not quite made it to the middle yet. I left that bit just so I could show you guys. All right, good stuff. So going to pop that one here, and we're going to start to mark in our little segments on here. Okay, good stuff. So just going to follow these lines, and I've got a ballpoint pen, just a normal biro type pen. Okay, and I'm just following these marks that are on our paper template. And this I've just photocopied a template of an Ammonite. Okay, these are very special to us in where we are in the rural Devon here. We're not far from the Jurassic coast, and these Ammonites show up on the beaches. You see them everywhere. They're really lovely little fossils, and they have this lovely spiral kind of coming into the middle. Okay, so let's see how far we've got with that. I think that's about as far as we'll go, but you get the idea. The carbon paper goes on top there, and we're just following the lines with our ballpoint pen, and that leaves this kind of waxy carbon on the surface of our timber here. Okay, so we're transferring. We're not kind of going in freehand with this. Quite a tricky design to go in freehand. So we're kind of cheating in a way, if you like. So that's the carbon paper. That's how I've transferred that that pattern on. And I'm just going to finish off this little spiral here in the middle with freehand with a pencil. Okay, this is a pencil we've made here. This is one of our little click pencils, mechanical pencil, I should say. And I'm just putting that spiral in the middle. Okay, so we can see it kind of just go down into nothing there in the middle. And this is more of a guideline, really. This is not the be all and end all. We can come off of these lines if we want, and I'm going to show you how we can kind of develop that pattern into something unique, something for us. Okay, so we got our first questions coming in. So Craig's on the questions today.
Yeah, afternoon, everybody. Yeah, a question from Maria in Wales. Ben, why don't you use graphite paper? She finds it quite easy to transfer the image without residue.
Yeah, so graphite paper is what I use at home, if I'm honest. I don't use it day to day because of the cost. Graphite paper is that bit more expensive. I could probably get 100 sheets of carbon paper for the same price as 10 sheets of the graphite paper. So when I'm at home, when I'm doing a special project, I'll use the graphite paper. It's my preferred choice. It doesn't leave that kind of waxy residue. So yeah, I do use the graphite paper, but for kind of day-to-day stuff, this carbon paper is good enough. It's doing the same job. And actually, where we've got this mounted on the chuck here, I can put this straight back onto the lathe. So once I've kind of done my markings on this, I can pop this straight back on the lathe and use that mechanical rotary sanding you get from the lathe to whiz all of this off. Okay, so another question.
Yeah, another question, Ben. Martin's asked, have you cut the template?
I have cut the template. Yeah, well spotted, Martin. So we've got a concaved curve here. All right. Actually, it's an OG, so it goes from a concave to a convex. All right, which is when you start introducing a flat pattern onto it, it crumples. All right. So if we have a look, if we come overhead here, Jason, lovely, thank you. So Jason's looking after us on the cameras today. If you push that flat bit of paper in, there's certain points where you're going to get an overlap. You see that? So what we did is we just cut down one of these cells and just kind of overlapped it. All right. But absolutely right. As soon as you start putting something flat onto something curved, it becomes distorted. All right. And you can see that kind of curve dipping in there and it comes back out. All right. So not the easiest thing to transfer onto. But yeah, we've put a few cuts in the template to allow us to kind of form into that curve. It might have thrown a couple of these out a little bit, but actually, I'm using this as a guide. I'm not following it really strictly, and there's a lot of this information I'm just going to leave off. The important bit is this kind of spiral coming out from the center. All right, and also this is a beautiful piece of sycamore. It is, you can see all these markings coming down through here, these kind of watermarks. And actually, it's got a ripple coming across the grain. Okay, I don't want to absolutely smother this in burnt material because we're going to start to lose some of that information that's already there. And, we're using wood. Why not show off the beauty of it? It's going to be a lovely piece once we do the burning on it. But what I'm trying to get at is we don't want to overdo it on the burning. Okay, we don't want that to kind of lose that lovely grain structure and the lovely kind of what is actually rot, if I'm honest. These kind of watermarks coming through it. And that in a moment we'll see. We're gonna perhaps take a carving chisel to this. So sometimes the little bits of rotten things, they're not the best to carve with, okay? But we're going to give it a go anyway. So I've got my Antex Firewriter here. Okay, this is the hot wire type of pyrography pen. Variable heat on it. What I do is I tend to tuck the cable into my elbow. And I'm using this up on edge. Okay, so I'm using that sharp edge just to cut in the beginnings of our pattern. All right. Burning a little bit slower, so I'm going to just creep the heat up a touch. Okay. That's better. That's making a more defined mark now. So I usually start a little bit cooler because I'm a scaredy cat. I don't want to go straight in and just burn. So I tend to start a little bit cooler than I expect to work at, and then just creep the heat up if I need to. Okay. Good stuff. So that's what we're going to be doing, is just cutting in all of these lines. All right. I'm going to come back into the center. I usually keep the template nearby so I can have a little peek at what's, the kind of shape. But really, I'm doing lots of straight lines here to create a curve. Okay. Now that curve kind of broadens out a bit, I can swing this pen around, twisting it as we go, and get that nice crisp line. Okay, let's extend that out a touch. And don't worry, you're not going to be here all the time watching me burn little lines. We've got some other things that we're going to look at. Okay. And I've also had a go at this yesterday, so we're going to fast forward in a moment. Okay. But let's get some of this information in. Generally, I'm going to start in the center. I tend to use my second hand to kind of help support it. Okay, so I'm using my other hand to kind of bring that curve in. And I'm still going with a straight line. You'll see on the bottom of this, there's lots of little kind of cells, I guess we'd call them, coming in to meet this central bit. So let's put in a few of those. Okay. And like I said before, this is just a guide. And I'm just putting these little curves in. As we start to get to these longer cells, I want to start putting a bit of my own kind of pattern in. So I'm going to bring it up about 3/4 of the way, and then I'm going to put a kind of half open triangle. All right. So bringing that up about 3/4 of the way, twisting the pen and just dropping it in and using that lovely straight, sharp tip to put that kind of open triangle shape in. And as we come around this spiral, it'll almost give it like a second spiral coming through. Okay, so we got another question.
Yep, got another question, Ben. Have you ever used xylene for marking out?
Xylene? No, I haven't. I've seen like a sorrel paper. That comes in a pack a bit like, I guess a bit like parchment, like cling film or tinfoil. It comes in a thing that you rip it off, and you can kind of get sheets as big as you want it if you've got like a bigger piece. But I've not heard of xylene. It's an interesting one. I'll check that out though. Thank you. So another question.
Yeah, what thickness of wire are you using in the tip? And are they homemade tips?
They are homemade tips. I make all my tips now. So the size of this one, let me show you on this camera here, actually. I'll show you the wire that I use. So it's a nichrome wire. This is 21 SWG, so that's the standard wire gauge. Okay. It's 0.8 mil on there. Sometimes they'll sell this stuff in weight. Sometimes they'll sell it in lengths. You can quite often get the kind of cheaper bits. You get like a couple of meters, a little reel in a bag. I like to buy because we use it a lot, and quite often at shows and things we're giving these tips out. I get a big reel of it. I've got meters and meters of it. That should last me. That should see me through that one. Okay. But yeah, that's a nichrome wire, nickel chrome. It's a resistance wire, and they also sell it by weight. Okay, so there's all sorts of different ways you can buy it, and that was just a little purchase I made a while back, and that's lasted me ages and ages. Okay. I like that 0.8 mil one or 21 on the SWG because it's nice and, well, it's kind of the best of both worlds. You get it's fairly thin, but it's robust enough to kind of take a, a shape, and it's not going to flex too much when I'm using it. Oop, forgot my little triangle there, chatting too much. It's not going to flex while we're using it too much, so we're not bending it back and forth and potentially snapping it. It kind of holds its shape, and I can lean on it a little bit as well. If I'm doing like a heavy texture or something like that, I can really kind of get down there and put some shapes onto the timber. But this is that lovely bit of sycamore you saw yesterday being turned. If you tuned into Colwyn's Turning Tuesday, and it's really nice. It's burning lovely. It smells lovely as well. It's got a kind of a sweet smell to the smoke. This is really unusual. I guess it's something to do with the rot in it, but it is lovely. So let's just get a few more of these in, and then we'll look at something a little bit different. Okay, so we got another question here from Craig.
Yeah, Ben. Maria's asked, can you do a video showing how you make and shape the tips?
Absolutely. If we get time, I might make one in a minute. As we switch on to another, another technique, I'll make a little tip for you and show you how that's done. And to be honest, there's a zillion tips you can get out there. I only really use 2 or 3. But yeah, let's make a tip in a minute. I've got all my gear here, so we'll go through that. It doesn't take long. It's a fairly straightforward little job. So I'll make one for you, Maria, show you how that's done. I'm kind of getting hypnotized in this little spiral here. It's a lovely little project, this. And it's repetitive. I'm doing the same thing lots and lots of times. Okay, so I'm kind of getting into a rhythm as I go. Now, where we're at here, it's starting to get a bit awkward. My hand's at an awkward angle. I'm not following that curve the way I'd like to. But the beauty of this, this little clamping system here is that we can just turn it. All right, we can just get it where we want it. And now I've got that kind of comfortable sweep with my wrist again. Okay. So, oh, I turned it off. Let's pop that back on. That helps. So, just picking up on this line, we'll do our little triangle. And I think we'll start to move on to something a little bit different. Okay. But you can start to see that building up. All right. If we had a few hours, we could go right the way through this. Well, it wouldn't take hours, but for the live demo, it's a little bit boring to watch us go through that. So let's start introducing a little bit of texture. Again, let's just quickly, really easily swing that handle out, pop it back in, and that is solid. All right, it's wobbling the bench. It's that solid. Okay. held on that SK114, the chuck off of the lathe there. So the kind of beauty with this system is that where Colin turned this yesterday, it's come straight off the lathe on the chuck, so it's kept nice and central, and if we wanted to put that back on the lathe, it's not moved at all, so we can sand this back, and we can use that mechanical sanding you get from the lathe, and also that gives you that lovely kind of scratch pattern, that lovely smooth finish. Okay. Now what I'm doing now, I'm putting on a little bit of texture. Really, if I was doing this as a whole project right the way through, I would carry on with these little lines, and I would do that whole spiral, and then I would mount it back on the lathe and sand it there. Okay, because this is burnt all under the surface, you'll never sand that back off, and I'll show you an example in a moment. But I'm going in with the texturing, okay, because we haven't really got time to pop it back on the lathe. And what I'm trying to do here is imagine these kind of segments sitting on top of one another to try and give it a little bit of depth. So using our sharp tip here, I've kind of kicked it over to the side a bit to give us a slightly wider line. I'm just literally putting in little kind of pips, okay, to try and create that illusion of a shadow. And as we come around that kind of repeating pattern, these lines are going to get longer and longer as the cells get wider and wider, and we'll get a lovely kind of texture off of that. You could use the side of the pen if you feel you wanted to go a bit darker. Let's just rotate that around a bit more and do a kind of dragging type burn. Okay, so I'm using the burn that's already there, that nice thin line. I'm using that to stop that burn from spreading. So the burn is kind of flaring out this way and not onto this one, which would be the high spot as the spiral goes round. Okay, so let's just do a couple more like that. So dragging the tip. Again, that's giving us that nice kind of feeling of a shadow or something. And I said before, this is a lovely piece of timber. I don't want to do too much burning on this, because when we put an oil on this, this is going to just spring to life. And I don't want to lose all that lovely markings through the timber. So we're not going to go too heavy with the burning. If this was a very plain piece of sycamore, which generally sycamore is quite a kind of creamy white color, I'd really go to town with texturing and all sorts of stuff. Okay. Just before we make a tip, I'm going to do a couple more of these around the side, because actually there's a bit of carving I want to show you. But let's get a couple of these big cells in. All right. So using my sharp tip, let's just cut that line in, turn them on again. Just a couple of seconds for it to heat up. And remember, we're doing that little triangle. Just adds a little bit of interest, and it also kind of creates a second spiral once the whole thing's together. So nice long sweeping burn, and this is cutting through the grain. Like I say, this bowl has a little bit of ripple to it, and quite often that ripple will kind of bully the pen out of the timber again. So with this sharp tip, we're cutting through all that tricky grain right into the timber. Okay, good. So we got another question.
Yes, Ben. Marcus has asked, do pyrography pens have standard sockets, i.e. are they interchangeable with other machines?
Good question, that. So Antex have this kind of, it's almost like a microphone jack, I would describe it as. Oops, sorry, I'm getting caught on my clamps there. So Antex have one like that. Our Bernie Star one has got 2 prongs. Okay, so completely different. While you're there, let me just see if I can grab one, see if I've got one at hand, because it's worth seeing that. Okay, so beg my pardon. So this is the Bernie Star. This is our Axminster pyrography station. That's got a couple of prongs. All right. Now, if you've got yourself a Peter Childs machine, these will fit straight in there. All right, and vice versa. If you've got one of our Axminster burning stations, the Peter Childs one will fit in that. Generally, no, they don't fit one another. But I did find out that you know, with my Axminster burning station, I've actually got a Peter Childs pen stuck to it. All right, so you might find that some of them are compatible, but generally, no. They like with all things, they want you to buy spare pens back from the company you bought the machine from. Okay, so generally they kind of stick with the same fixtures and fittings. Okay, so another question.
Yeah, Kevin's asked another inquiry about the Pro Mount. Can you confirm the spindle diameter, please?
The spindle diameter. So this has come off of our what I'd call the 1628. It's the 406 now. And that's got a T38 thread on it. Okay, so but you can get different spindle sizes, I think. But it's to whatever your chuck is. Okay, so having a look there, you can see that's the bottom of the chuck, and that's going straight on the thread on the Pro Mount. Okay, really nice, and that thread is so solid. You know, it keeps everything so nice and you know, I couldn't budge that if I tried. All right, a really nice thing. You know, this spins in there. That's, you can see the chuck spinning with it now, but also it's got this handle here. I really give this some welly when I did it up. Might need to give that a little clout. Good. And then you get your tilt. So if you're working, you know, like this, head on, you can, you know, just make yourself comfortable. Put it where you're comfortable. And likewise, you could do this on the on your banjo, on the lathe. This would fit straight onto your where the tool rest sits. That bar will go into the tool rest. And you could do all of this at your lathe. You still got that same tilt and the same rotation. So all of this could be done at the lathe. Okay, good. Really good for those people who like to turn and then kind of embellish their workpiece. Perhaps they're into piercing and things like that. You need to get right to the bottom of your vessel, vase, whatever it is. You know, with your little rotary tools for your piercing jobs. Really good for those kind of you know, stuff that's coming off the lathe, but then you're then decorating or carving, all that sort of stuff. Okay. All right. So let's crack on with our spiral here. And you can see how easy that is. Just a little lever. So the machine's gone back on, our fire writer. That way up with my tip. And we're popping in that triangle again. I'm just going to do a couple more of these, folks, and then we'll get on to something a little bit different. Again, using my other hand to kind of support this hand. I'm using the edge of the bowl to kind of rest on. Down with that line. Pop in our little triangle there. And here we go. So what have we got there? We've got 1, 2, 3 that we can play around with. I think that'll be enough for today. So you could carry on with this kind of marking if you didn't want to go, didn't want to go with your carving. You could carry on with these little lines here. You could put in that shading. That's it, lovely. So these little lines here, you could carry on that right around to the edge of the bowl. Okay. What I want to do is give this a little bit more of a texture. So when we look at the bowl, there's like a little V groove here, so you really get that kind of feeling of one segment sitting on top of another. All right. So let's do a bit of carving. I've got my little flex cut chisel roll here. And I'm going to go with the V tool. I honed that up earlier. V tool, pop it in the handle there. And just pop them to one side. Now, these tools are really sharp, so be careful when you're using them, okay? Again, make sure you're in a comfortable position. Make sure your hands are behind the cutting edge. And we've got our little pyrography line to kind of come up to on this one. So if we could go to that overhead camera there, Jason. Lovely, thank you. What we're going to do is carve out this little bit here. So it looks like this is kind of above that one. We don't need to carve out loads. I'm going to start off with my V tool, just touching the bevel on, and then just raise the handle a touch, and I'm pushing that away from me. Okay. I'm kind of limiting the cut by how high the handle sits. And I'm just coming off the edge like that, making a little kind of V groove. Okay. Good stuff. So another question.
Yeah, question from Maria. Can you show how to hone the V tool? She can never get hers sharp.
Absolutely. So I've got my little hone out in anticipation. Let's just get that nice and in there. I'm just going to take off a touch more of this, Maria, and then we'll look at honing. And I'll show you a couple of ways of doing it. All right. Flex cut, do a profiled hone. What I'm doing there is I'm just doing that little V, and I'm just leaning the chisel over and just skimming off the material on this side. Okay. Lovely. Thanks, Craig. So here's our leather hone. Comes with this gold bar. It's actually like an abrasive bar. Okay, let's have a look at that top down. You can see that those profiles on there. We've got a couple of different V tool ones because you get different shaped V tools. There's like a 40 and a 70 degrees, a 45, I should say. There's all sorts of little rounded ones here for the insides of your, the ones with the steeper sweep. And then we've got this nice open one here. And then again, this kind of very gentle radius on the leather strop on the end there. On the other side, we've got just a piece of leather. All right. So these are wood. It's just a piece of wood. We want to put a bit of our gold soap on there. Not too much. We don't want to absolutely cake it, but we want some of that. That's the compound that's going to be cutting the metal. Okay. So our chisel is laying flat down on the hone here. And we're just going to drag that backwards. Really important you drag it backwards towards yourself. And that's just going to polish the inside of that bevel. Okay. And I would do this pretty much every time I use it. Every time it goes back into the chisel roll, give it a little tickle, a little hone. And that's the way you want to keep it sharp. If these things get to the point where you need to regrind them, they can be tricky to reshape. Okay, so that's just a little polish on the inside. And what I'm doing is I'm putting a bit of pressure one way and then back up to the top, and then I'm putting a bit of pressure on the other side. And you can see it's kind of, you can see the metal it's taking off. It's kind of like a black material. Okay, you can see it on here and on our hones there. So flip that over. A bit more of our cutting compound. And then I'm going to do one side. And I'm using a fair bit of pressure with that. Okay. Again, always be careful of that cutting edge, but lay it down flat, right up until you feel the bevel, and then just drag it towards you. Okay. Same on the other side. We're going to lay it flat, pull him up until that bevel is right in contact with the leather. And we'll do a few sweeps each side. And then let's not forget our little kind of cutting bit right in the middle. And this is almost like 3 gouges here. You've got a very small kind of veiner gouge in the middle. So let's bring that up. Let's have a proper look at this. Okay. So you got your one bevel there, another one there, and actually it's quite hard to see, but in the middle it's like it's a rounded shape. It's not 2 flats coming together. It's like a little veining tool. Let's check it right down the barrel there. All right, it's a kind of round on the underneath of that chisel. So that's honing, really easy. We're just gonna drag it towards us and just roll it on that little belly as well. I want to get to that point. And I kind of bring that up more than you think, because actually at the very nose, it kind of curves in like a little veining tool. All right. So let's pop him to one side. Lovely. So another question.
Well, not exactly a question. Maria says, thanks, Ben. You're brilliant.
Thanks, Maria. Thanks for supporting us and asking all your questions. Really appreciate it. And that's what we're here for, folks. You know, if you've got questions, just pop them in the comments and we'll do our best to answer them. So what we're doing here is just removing that material there. And I will make you a tip in a moment as well. Let's not forget tip making. So I'm not taking loads of wood off here. Remember, this has a slight bit of rock to it. So it's kind of like a grainy noise as I'm cutting it. It's not a clean cutting as, you know, normally a sycamore would be. And I'm kind of falling off the edge here. If I noticed it was pulling out a big bit of grain or something like that, I might want to switch my grip and come back towards me. Okay. But really important, we stay behind that cutting edge. We can't be like this, cutting towards ourselves. We'll place the chisel. And what I would do is have one hand on the steel like this, one hand on the handle, and just limit that cut. Okay. So you've only got the twist of your wrist. You're limiting how far you can come in. So you're not going to kind of be cutting wood and then come out of it and potentially bringing that gouge towards you. You're limiting your cut using your hands or your wrist. Okay. Really important. Carving, especially these little flex cut tools, they're so sharp. The chisels have to be so sharp to kind of remove the timber. And obviously that presents its own danger. We just want to be extra careful. We're not, you know, putting ourselves at risk. Okay. So what I'm trying to do here is just give ourselves, when we look at the kind of profile of the bowl, we're going to give ourselves a few little kind of chips. I'll bring this up to camera in a minute and we can have a proper look. Okay, so having done that, our bit of carving, I'm going back into the pyrography. I'm putting this away. Don't leave it out on the bench. Again, let's just tuck that away. Nice and safe. And then pop that to one side. So you're not going to lean on it or anything like that. So we've got a few little nicks here. We could go straight in with the pyro. We could smooth that out with pyrography using our tip. But I really like these kind of sanding sticks, which I'll show you. All right, so we could do this. We could blend off of that top edge. Remember, as I said, as we come out on this spiral, these lines that we're putting in are going to get a bit longer. So I'm just putting a few of these bigger lines in here. It's really just a little texture. We're not going overboard with it. We've got that lovely piece of timber. We're not messing around with it too much. Okay. So we could do that. And again, as that builds around the spiral, we're going to get a really lovely effect. You could bring it right down if you wanted. Bring these lines right down here. And, you know, bring it right into the center. Up to you. This is, you know, there's no wrong or right of how you do this. Make your own patterns, your own interesting textures and stuff. Okay, so another question.
Yep, question from Ollie. What do the different colors of honing compound mean?
I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. I think most people have their own kind of color. The green one I've used a lot on mops and things, and that comes in a great big bar. The gold one is flex cut. I think it changes manufacturer to manufacturer. They probably, you know, might have different purposes. I know, you know, this is a bit like your buff bars and things like that we use in wood turning on mops. They, you know, some of them, you know, we're working on a porous material here. If you're using cutting compounds on mops to polish things, you need to kind of consider the color of it, that you're not putting a dark one on a light piece of timber. But generally for sharpening, I've seen these gold ones, I've seen blue ones, and I've seen green ones. I think it's just the color from the manufacturing, to be honest. But I'll check that out. All right, it's worth knowing that. But thanks for your question, Ollie. Okay, so what are we up to? I just wanted to smooth those in a bit. All right, I've got a little sanding stick here. This is something I pinched out of Jason's cupboard. All right, this is a lovely little a sanding stick. It's basically a piece of MDF with a bit of abrasive stuck on it. Nothing fancy. What I'm doing here is just using that abrasive to tidy up and round off that cut I've made. And what that's doing is I'm concentrating where we've made our carving cut. That's just dropping this side of the this cell on the shell just down a touch. Give you a really nice kind of subtle change in direction. It's going to clean up any little facets you may have left behind with the carving tool. And it's not very obvious on camera, but we'll show you in a bit how we get to this effect, how cool it looks once we're done. All right, we'll get it up on that close camera in a minute. So I like this little thing. It's so simple and it's just leaves a lovely finish. It doesn't cost the earth. It's you know, it's a piece of scrap timber and a piece of abrasive. Bit spray mount, bit copy deck, something like that, just to stick it on. And I'm just getting right down into that little groove, and I'm kind of smoothing that groove or blending it up into the other cell. Good. So another question.
Yeah, John's asked, any tips for avoiding line blindness, particularly when doing Celtic patterns?
Line blindness. So I've got at home a what do they call it? Lightcraft. Lightcraft do a really lovely posable lamp. It's got a great big magnifying glass in the middle, so you swing up a little kind of plastic cover. It's got warm lights and cool lights, because some of us, you know, struggle with certain types of light. That's got them both. It's got the warm and the cool. If you imagine like your Christmas twinkly lights, you get that kind of warm orangey look, or the very kind of clean white look you get in your fridges and stuff. So it's got both of those types of lights on it, little LEDs. It's got a great big whacking magnifying glass in the middle, so you can, you know, really see in there in a detail. I use it when I'm doing really fine stuff, when I'm getting right down into the detail. This is a bit more kind of free form, a bit easier to look at. But I know what you mean. I sometimes get, if I'm doing lots of stuff with kind of parallel lines and things like that, it's quite hard to tell the difference between, you know, what you've burnt and what is carbon sometimes. And it'll even get to the stage where I'm sanding this up, sanding this back, and I think, oh, blimey, I've missed a couple of lines there. Happens to us all. But yeah, certainly I find that Lightcraft light really useful, and you can swing it in and out. It's like one of those posable lamps. You can kind of bring it in, have a look. You know, if it's annoying you, push it out the way. If you're coming into detail, bring it in and do your bit, and then just swing it out the way again. Really useful little thing, that. Okay, so we're starting to build a kind of set of ridges across here. Let me just see if I can get that on camera. It'd be nice to see it. Not quite getting it there. There we go. A little, you can see a little bit of it. Okay. Not so much, not very impressive from this angle. But when you see it kind of from the edge from where I'm sat, if I'm looking down it there, I can see some little steps, and that really gives just that little subtle cutout, really gives it a whole bunch of depth. Without going heavy on the shading. Remember, we're trying to not put too much burnt information on this. Okay, I think we should make a little tip, because Maria's asked for it. We should do that. We can crack back on with this one in a minute. But let's come over to that overhead one, Jason, see if I can get this. There we go. Lovely. So we can just about see that. I might tilt this out of the way of the light so you can see a little bit more, and you can see that Pro mount in its full glory, and that lovely SK114 holding the bottom of that, and lovely deep foot that Colwyn turned for us. So we got our wire, we got a pair of snips, and also a pair of pliers. Okay. These are jeweler's ones, really useful for tip making, because they're sprung. When you put them together, they spring back out. Okay, so it's a one-handed job. I'm going to unravel a little bit of my wire, about 1.25 inches, perhaps a bit less. And I'm holding on to this kind of the kind of loose end. Right? If you snip that just like that, that's going to ping across the room. So clip that one off. When you clip these, they're generally got a very sharp end on them. So I just use a little bit of abrasive just to whiz off that kind of sharp burr, because I'm going to be squeezing this in my fingertips in a minute, and I don't want to cut myself. Okay, so nothing fancy. It's a little bit of wire. Okay, and what I'm going to do is just hold that either end and then just bend it around my finger. All right, so you get this kind of U-shaped piece of wire. Okay, going to hold it on its ends. It doesn't matter that it's not perfect. We're not striving for perfection. And then just going to use my pliers just to gently bring that in. And it's going to want to twist. A little bit fiddly, but with a bit of perseverance, you'll get that in. Okay. So that, albeit a bit wonky, is a writing tip. And let's bring that up to camera 3 here. Okay. So that's like your writing tip. You could do loads of stuff with that. This is the one that kind of burns on your surface. Good for quick changes of direction, and it really is that easy. You just bend it around your finger and crimp it in. If we're going for those sharp tips, and this is the one I would say I do kind of 90% of my work with, we need to hammer that flat. So we've got our little shape there, and I'm just going to take the hammer to that. Sorry, this may be a bit noisy, folks, but bear with me. And that's a kind of glancing blow. I'm not forging. I'm just tapping that out. And apologies to the guys there, making a right racket. Okay, so let's come back to our camera over here. All right, you can see I've kind of flattened that now. All right, so it's nice and flat that side, wide on that side. Okay, very good. And then just a bit of abrasive again. I'm going to use this abrasive just to sharpen it. So I'm putting it down the side of my little piece of steel here. Again, we're very lucky here. We're spoilt rotten. I've got a little steel plate from our engineering department. Don't do this on stone. Don't do it on wood. You need to find something metal. And quite often the go-to, if I can't find my little lump of steel here, would be, you know, like the jaw on a vise, on a bench vise. Got quite a nice solid bit of steel on that. Good. So, just using that abrasive to sharpen that, and that is sharp now. That's got a knife edge on it. Let's bring it back over here. All right. Oops. Okay, up on edge now. That's got a little bevel on it. It's very small. You can see the kind of polish it's given it. That's quite a high grit. That's 400 grit. Okay, we don't want to be stripping the metal right way back. We're just putting an edge on it. Okay, so another question.
Yeah, a question from Chris. I'm assuming that you can get the same effect using a rotary burr tool or something like a Dremel rather than carving the groove that you've been doing.
Yeah, absolutely. So sometimes I'll use, sorry, that wasn't threaded in properly there. Sometimes I'll use a, oh, blimey. So I'll be right back with you. Let's just get that in there. I've somehow managed to undo the thread on that. So let's get that back. You may have to remind me of that question, Craig. I lost it there.
To put in
grooves
around the edge.
Grooves around the edge.
Rotary tool.
Absolutely. Yeah. You could use a rotary tool. Absolutely. It depends on. I like the power file. I really like that one. Sorry, folks. Let me just give this a little whack. I don't know my own strength. I've tightened him up a little bit too much. There we go. I put a bit too much welly on that when I tightened it up. So I use power file quite a lot, and it looks like a great big tool, but you can whiz these things off in seconds if you use something like this, and actually very accurate. You can get this just right on that line. Bzz, that would take seconds. Okay, so perhaps if you were doing a big one of something like this, and it was a bit more, there's a bit more material to it, it wasn't such a gorgeous piece of timber, you can really put some depth on this using something like a power file. Just down that line, you can get really good results with that. And although it's a wide belt, you can be very accurate with it on its edge. You could use something like this. So this is a kind of powered unit. All right. That comes with a little foot pedal. This is the Wee Cheer one. And that is a little saber-tooth burr in the end there. Again, really quick and easy just to whiz that material back. And there's all sorts of burrs and little cutters on the market that will fit a rotary tool like that. Absolutely. Again, different people prefer to use different tools. With something where I'm going for just a little bit of detail on this, I find the V tool got a little bit more control, and it's not as messy. So keep this work area nice and clean. But yeah, use whatever you want. Okay, you could even use your like a knife. You could score this. Let me just rotate this around. You could score this with a knife. This is one of the little flex cut knives. Okay. So just going in, a couple of little cuts. This is almost like a stop cut. And you could come from this direction and just pair that off. So yeah, there's loads of ways you could carve this. I just really like my little set of flex cut chisels. All right, good. We're going to look at some of the powered carving as we go through our demonstrations. That one's definitely on the list because it's a good fun, and I'm kind of learning it at the moment as well. And perhaps we could all have a look at that and learn together. So, tip making. So that was, you've got a couple of tips there. You've got your writing style tip and the kind of flat, sharp tip. All right, so that was just for you, Maria. Let's pop that to one side. Okay, so another question.
Yeah, Marcus has said, would using a red carbon paper for the outlines help seeing which lines have been burnt?
Absolutely, yeah. Again, when we're marking out, you can get I know the sorrel paper they do in blues, reds, yellows. You can get kind of dressmakers stuff that comes in huge rolls, and that's probably the cheapest way to get it. It's quite waxy. I find the sorrel paper a little bit waxy as well. But yeah, absolutely, you can get all sorts of different colors. That will distinguish what's been burnt, what's not. What you might find is the cleanup can be a little bit messy. With that red kind of wax, if you sand that back sometimes, if you haven't got a sander with extraction on it, you can quite often kind of rub that red back into the grain. So just be a little bit careful, but certainly if you're marking out, if you've got your template and, red biro I use quite a lot on the templates, and that gives you, that allows you to see it a lot more clearly. But yeah, good idea. So we've done a little bit of carving. We've done a little bit of pyro on here. If you have a look at we did some textures a little while back on another video. You could introduce those textures onto a bowl like this. There's loads you could do with this, and you could just keep going and going until you're happy with it. But let's for this one today, we're keeping it simple because we want that lovely piece of timber to sing, really. Okay, so really just go in on that. Let me show you what I've been working on yesterday and today, this morning. We had a little go at this. This is another one Colwyn's turn for us. And if we come over to our camera here, lovely. So you can see that one's got a lot more design on it. And I did put this back on the lathe and sanded it. Okay, you can see it's got a lot of dust in it at the moment. So let's use our brush, get rid of that, that wood dust, and just bring that pyro back into life. Sometimes it can be a bit scary when you sand these things. You think you've sanded it all off, but it's still there because we burnt quite deep. It's all burnt into the surface. Okay, so you can see where we've built up those little kind of lines coming through. You can see where we've put in that little triangle that gave us another kind of level of detail, and it's just swirling out onto the edge of the rim there. Let's tip it over, and you can see those little cutouts we've made. All right, not too obvious, but when this is in your hand, you can see it, you can feel it. It's quite a big notch out of there. All right, lovely looking little thing. And also, I was showing this to the guys yesterday. We were thinking about perhaps putting a little leg under here and perhaps cutting off this section so it looks like that real true Ammonite. So it will stop here and follow this edge all the way around. Okay, so you can cut these and things like that. Be a bit careful if you're cutting on this on the bandsaw, because you've got that tip. All right, we need to have some sort of support under there if you're going to think about doing that sort of thing. But certainly you could do that on your scroll saw. Just be really careful when you're cutting anything that's got a shape on it. Okay, I think, nice looking little thing that. I'm going to put a bit of oil on it, and we'll see this ripple come out. We see this ripple just running down through here. Hopefully that oil is going to really bring this timber to life and really show off some of this mottling, these kind of watermarks running through that piece of timber. So let's pop that on top of that one. I'm going to grab, this is just chestnut finishing oil. Okay. Oh, let's pop them that way around. This can, like all oils, it'll give it that kind of amber color. So if you've got a very pale piece of timber, it'll have that kind of amber color to it. I'm not putting loads in our little takeaway tub here. Just enough to kind of wet the brush and come straight onto the bowl. Okay, we should get some lovely markings coming out of this. I'm just seeing that lovely ripple kind of come to life. And it's bringing out all those kind of dark patches. Any kind of wood dust that was left there from the sanding is being washed away. This is my favorite part of putting the oil on. It means you're nearly finished. And also it brings out the grain of the wood, brings out the real beauty of it. It's really darkening the pyrography. So it's going that kind of jet black color. Nice. So you can see the color kind of pop out on that piece of timber now. I'm just running the brush over, making sure I have not left any kind of pooling in any of these the pyrography that we've done. That's come out lovely. Got a lovely little ripple to that. And come over onto our main camera here. All right. You just see that ripple come alive in the bowl there. Like I say, kept it quite simple for this. Normally, if I was doing like a fossil or something, there'd be a lot more shading, a lot more kind of going on in there. But I kept it quite subtle for this because of that piece of timber. You know, we're not going to overdo it and lose, you know, or distract from that lovely piece of timber. All right. Okay, so we've got a question from Craig.
Yeah, a question. If you wanted to add some colour, what would be your choice? Acrylic paints from tubes, using brushes, stencils, pencils? What would you like?
So I would leave that totally up to you. What you need to consider is that actually, you know, certain things, if you're going to, you know, put an oil on top of this, you need to consider it's going to be kind of compatible with that finish. You could put whatever you like on there. You could use felt tips. You could use, you know, watercolor. You could use acrylics. I prefer spirit stains, again, because they kind of stain the wood, and you can still see all that, that lovely grain and things behind it. Whereas acrylic will give you that lovely kind of vibrant color, but it doesn't, it sits on top of the wood, so you can't see through the paint. Okay, whereas a stain, you can see through it and you can see the grain behind it. So I tend to go with stains, and the felt tips are the same. The brush felt tips, they're really nice colors in that. Really simple and easy to use. You know, you can get the kids on it. You know, they're going to really enjoy doing stuff like that. But yeah, you use whatever color you got, as long as if you're, you know, you're considering the finish that you're putting on top of that. So if you're putting an oil on top of, say, you've done watercolors, you're going to pick up the pigment and wash it around a little bit. My advice would be just to be very quick when you're oiling it. Don't whiz around with the brush too much. You put your oil on and you kind of let it soak in and drink into the timber. Okay. But just be careful, you know, being a bit wishy-washy with the brushes. That can smudge things and pick up the pigment. All right. Good stuff. So another question.
Yeah, question from John. Do the pyro lines prevent colours from bleeding?
They do. Yeah. So as long as we're not loading the brush up too much, that pyro line will keep it in check. Okay. I do quite a lot of birds and things, and fish. When the color goes on there, as long as I'm not overloading the brush, you know, you've got to have some material on it, but I tend to just wipe off the excess. Don't blot it off on a piece of paper, because then you're wasting the product. Wipe it back in the neck of the bottle so it kind of falls back in, and then, you know, apply the color. If, you know, quite often you sort of feel that the more you put on, the kind of deeper or richer the color is going to be. But I would definitely build that up in layers. So if you're not quite getting the vibrancy or you know, the kind of depth of color that you want, just revisit it with that same color and just do it a few times. And then once you've got like 3 or 4 layers on there, that's when it really, you know, gives it that kind of punchy colored look. Okay, good. So thanks for joining us today. Tomorrow we got Craig. He's looking at tips on the bandsaw for the turners. Okay, tips for turners on the bandsaw. And so that's Craig's demo tomorrow. So come back and join us then. Thanks for tuning in today and having a look at this this Ammonite bowl. And we'll see you again soon.